Imagine, just for a second, the physical sensation of stepping out of your front door.
Right, something you do every day.
Exactly. It's an action you likely performed this morning without allocating, a single conscious brain cell to the process.
Just pure muscle memory.
Yeah. You grabbed your keys, you felt the cold metal of the doorknob, you turned it, and you stepped out into the noise and the light of the world. It's totally automatic.
You don't even think about it.
But I want you to take that mental image and completely dismantle it. Just erase the ease of it.
Okay, I'm picturing that.
Erase the autopilot. I want you to imagine that before today, the very last time you turned that doorknob, the last time you actually stepped outside your home for any kind of social event was 8 years ago.
Wow. When you really sit with that number, 8 full consecutive years, the weight of that visualization is staggering.
It really is 8 years of staying inside.
That is almost a decade of human life occurring entirely within the confines of a few square feet.
8 years of watching the seasons change through the exact same pane of glass. Think about where you were 8 years ago.
A completely different lifetime.
Right. Think about all the different versions of yourself you've been since then. Now imagine all that time passing, the world spinning on its axis, new technologies emerging, friends moving away. Well, you are entirely, completely standing still.
It's a heavy thought.
It is. And today's deep dive is built around an intensely personal first-hand account from a writer who lived exactly this reality.
They lived as a Hikikomori for 8 unbroken years.
Yeah, Hikikomori, for those who might not know, it's a term originating in Japan describing individuals who withdraw from society and seek extreme degrees of isolation.
Seems confinement, yeah.
Right. And we're going to look at the exact mechanics of what happened when this author suddenly, abruptly re-entered the social world for one single night.
And what elevates this source material, from a simple diary entry to a really crucial psychological case study is the author's level of introspection.
Oh, absolutely. The detail is incredible.
We aren't just getting a sequence of events. We are getting a surgical deconstruction of a highly stressed human mind.
Yeah, the author doesn't just tell us that going outside was terrifying.
Yeah.
They break down the exact psychological architecture of that terror.
Which is fascinating.
Which sets up our mission for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We are not just here to gawk at a story of severe social isolation, although the framework is undeniably fascinating.
Right. There's a bigger purpose here.
Exactly. Our goal is to map the absolute anatomy of inferiority. We need to understand how inferiority is constructed in the human brain, how it physically paralyzes our decision-making, and most importantly, we're going to extract the specific, actionable psychological tools required to dismantle it.
Because we all deal with that, right?
We do. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through this essay, the circumstances are obviously an extreme outlier, but the underlying emotions, the dread, the comparison, the overthinking, I found myself relating to almost every single beat.
And that paradox is exactly why this piece really warrants a deep dive. On the surface, an 8-year total withdrawal from society is, it's a behavioral extreme.
Very extreme.
But when you strip away the sheer duration, the psychological mechanisms at play are universally active in all of us.
Yeah, like the instinct to endlessly compare our achievements to our peers.
Exactly. Or the utter paralysis of overthinking a minor social interaction.
Oh, or the stomach-dropping dread of an unread message sitting on your phone.
Right. These are standard human experiences. In the author's case, the volume knob on these experiences has just been, turned up to a deafening system-breaking level.
It really is just a matter of volume. And the narrative anchor that we're going to follow today is a collision of two completely incompatible realities.
It's quite the setup.
It is. On one side of the table, you have our author, a severe shut-in. And on the other side, you have a highly polished, incredibly successful former friend.
The contrast is wild.
And the central tension is how a human being survives that kind of emotional collision. How do you sit across a table from someone who is a walking, breathing embodiment of everything you feel you've failed to become?
It's a collision that forces a psychological reckoning, not just for the author, but for anyone who has ever felt like they were falling behind in a timeline of their own life.
Yeah. So let's get into the catalyst. The narrative kicks off in early 2024. The author is in their room, and their phone screen lights up.
They receive a text message?
Right. And it's incredibly brief. It just says, "Happy New Year. Want to go for a drink?"
Just 10 words.
10 words. Now, to understand why this isn't just a casual ping, we have to look at the sender. The sender is a friend that the author essentially ghosted 6 years prior.
6 years.
Yeah. The author had silently exited a group chat online, which is a popular messaging app, and just vanished from this person's life for over half a decade without a word.
So it's 6 years of total radio silence, suddenly punctured by a 10-word invitation.
And the author explicitly notes that normally, the mere prospect of replying to any message, let alone one carrying this much baggage, would trigger days of agonizing paralysis.
They would just stare at it.
Yeah, they would open the app, draft responses, delete them, spiral into worst-case scenario planning, and, well, ultimately do nothing.
Which is a very common anxiety response.
And I think anyone listening can tap into that feeling. I mean, an overdue text message or email is essentially a ticking psychological bomb on your screen.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The longer you leave it unanswered, the more explosive the guilt becomes, right?
Yeah.
A day late feels bad. A week late feels unprofessional.
But 6 years late?
6 years late. Bypassing the guilt of ignoring someone for 6 years requires a psychological leap that is almost impossible to comprehend.
It is. And to understand the sheer difficulty of that leap, we really have to look closely at the underlying mechanics of that paralysis.
Okay, let's do that.
Because we have to ask, why does the simple motor function of typing on a glass screen become physically heavy after years of isolation?
Right, it's just tapping your thumbs.
Exactly. But the answer lies in a neurological process we can refer to as social atrophy.
Social atrophy. Okay, I hear the word atrophy, and I immediately think of, like, a leg in a cast.
Yeah, that's the classic physical analogy, but let's map it onto the brain. If you don't use a muscle, the body stops sending resources to it, and it physically shrinks.
Makes sense.
Well, the brain operates in a remarkably similar principle called synaptic pruning. It's essentially a use it or lose it system.
Oh, wow.
Think of your neural pathways for social interaction like a complex network of dirt roads. When you are socializing daily, those roads are packed down, they're smooth, and they're easy to navigate.
You don't even think about driving on them.
Right. You instinctively read facial expressions, you understand conversational pacing, you modulate your tone of voice without thinking. But if you don't drive on those roads for 8 years, they get overgrown with weeds. Trees fall across them, they wash out.
So when the text message arrives, the brain tries to send a signal down that social road, and it just hits a massive roadblock.
The signal hits a fallen tree and the brain panics. Because the pathways for casual, safe social interpretation have degraded, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, hijacks the entire process.
It goes into survival mode.
Yes. The brain no longer views a casual text as just a text. Because it involves unpredictable human variables, it treats the notification as a high-stakes existential threat.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least clarify something for the listener.
Sure, go ahead.
A lot of people are naturally introverted. A lot of people hate texting back and prefer to be left alone. How do we differentiate between standard introversion, like the desire to recharge away from people, and the kind of structural degradation you're talking about with social atrophy?
That is a crucial distinction. Introversion is a baseline personality trait related to how you regain energy.
Right.
An introvert might go to a party, have a perfectly functional, engaging time, and then feel the need to spend Sunday alone reading a book to recharge. The neural pathways for socializing are fully intact and functional.
It just costs a lot of energy to use.
Exactly. Social atrophy, on the other hand, is an acquired deficit. The pathways themselves are damaged or unmaintained.
I see.
The author isn't avoiding the text because they want to relax. They are avoiding it because the cognitive machinery required to process it has rusted shut, and that causes severe distress.
That makes a lot of sense. The brain is interpreting the unknown as a threat. And the familiar, the four walls of the bedroom, is equated with absolute safety.
Complete safety, yes.
So the brain's defense mechanism kicks in, initiating this massive overthinking loop. Like, what if he's angry about the 6 years? What if I look terrible? What if I have nothing to say?
The spiral starts.
But here is the major plot twist of the essay, right at the beginning. The author doesn't fall into that loop.
Which is incredible.
Driven by a New Year's resolution they made to prioritize a concept they called execution, meaning pure action, the author replies.
Within seconds.
Just instantly.
Yeah.
They type, let's go, hit send, and completely shock themselves.
The speed of that reply is the entire crux of the event. If they hadn't replied in seconds, this deep dive wouldn't even exist.
Seriously.
If we look at the neurobiology of overthinking, the author literally had to bypass the brain's analytical center.
Because if you give the brain even 60 seconds,
If you give the prefrontal cortex 60 seconds, it will successfully generate 100 completely logical-sounding reasons to maintain your current state of safety.
it's too smart for its own good.
Exactly. The concept of execution the author relied on isn't just a motivational buzzword, it's a biological hack.
A biological hack. I love that.
By acting in mere seconds, the author essentially outran their own anxiety. They used the motor cortex to initiate the action before the amygdala could fully boot up its threat response and flood the nervous system with cortisol.
I always think of this like standing on the edge of a high dive.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
If you walk to the edge, look down, and start calculating the distance and thinking about how much it's going to sting if you belly flop, you are climbing back down the ladder.
Every time.
You have to sprint down the board and leap before your brain realizes what you're doing. But hitting send is just the leap. It's the adrenaline-fueled initial step. The actual impact with the water comes when that digital text message materializes into a physical meetup.
Right, because a text message is abstract. You can send it from the safety of your bed.
Yeah, you're still in your pajamas.
Exactly. A face-to-face meeting is a concrete, multi-sensory reality that you absolutely cannot control.
Which brings us to the day of the reunion. The author has to leave the house, navigate to a busy train station, and meet this friend.
A huge hurdle already.
And immediately, we are hit with an incredibly stark visual contrast. The author arrives wearing the exact same clothes they've been cycling through for the past 8 years.
The 8-year-old clothes?
Yeah. They haven't had the need, the money, or the mental bandwidth to care about their appearance. But when they spot their friend at the station, the friend is unrecognizable from the person they knew 6 years ago.
The friend hasn't just changed. He is transformed into someone whose entire existence is predicated on visual presentation.
Exactly. The essay explains that the friend is now working as a host. And for those unfamiliar with the Japanese nightlife industry, a host club is a very specific environment.
It's very unique.
Hosts are male entertainers paid to drink, converse, and charm female clients. It's a highly competitive profession where your income is directly tied to your charisma, your conversation skills, and critically, your grooming.
Grooming is everything in that industry.
So this friend's hair is flawlessly styled. His clothes are tailored and sophisticated. Even his perfume is distinct and noticeable.
The juxtaposition is almost cinematic.
It really is.
You have an individual who has spent 8 years attempting to be invisible, standing shoulder to shoulder with someone whose literal profession is social hypervisibility.
And this is where the author describes a feeling that I find fascinating. Standing next to this incredibly polished host, the author is suddenly overwhelmed by the sensation that the entire train station is staring at them.
They feel completely exposed.
Yeah, they feel the collective gaze of the crowd burning into them, highlighting how pathetic they look in comparison. Now, I have to play the skeptic here. Are people actually staring? I mean, an 8-year-old faded t-shirt next to a guy smelling like Tom Ford in a bespoke suit, that is a jarring visual contrast.
It is noticeable, sure.
Isn't it a bit dismissive to just chalk this up to paranoia? People probably were looking.
That is a very fair pushback. It's highly probable that a few commuters glanced their way because, as you said, humans are wired to notice contrast.
Right.
However, the psychological mechanism at play here isn't about whether a physical glance occurred. It's about the massive cognitive weight the author assigns to that glance. What we are seeing is a severe manifestation of the spotlight effect.
The spotlight effect. The feeling that we are the main character and everyone is watching our mistakes.
Yes. It's a cognitive bias where we dramatically overestimate the degree to which other people are noticing or judging our actions, our appearance, or our flaws.
We think everyone cares as much as we do.
Precisely. And to understand why this happens, we have to look at evolutionary psychology. Our brains evolved in small, tight-knit tribal communities.
Yep.
In those environments, social standing was literally a matter of life and death. If the tribe disapproved of you, you could be ostracized. And in the ancestral environment, isolation meant death by starvation or predation.
Oh, wow.
Well,
So our brains are hardwired to constantly scan the environment to see if we are being judged, because historically, being judged negatively meant getting kicked out of the cave.
exactly. The brain interprets a weird look from a stranger not as a fleeting moment of curiosity, but as a potential threat to survival.
That's intense.
Now, normally, a healthy adult brain can modulate this instinct and realize, okay, that person on the train doesn't actually care about my shoes.
Right, they have their own problems.
But for the author whose social pathways have atrophied, that modulation system is broken. The spotlight effect is amplified 1,000-fold. The reality of a busy train station is that everyone else is wrapped up in their own spotlight effect, worrying about their own commute or their own bad hair day.
We're all just worried about ourselves.
Yes. But for the author, the contrast with the friend acts as a massive magnifying glass on their own insecurities.
It's a complete sensory overload. It's not just the visual of the tailor's clothes, it's the smell of the sophisticated perfume. These are aggressive, undeniable sensory reminders of the massive gap between them.
It's overwhelming data.
It made me think deeply about the concept of temporal markers. The friend's polished look, his career, his confident posture, those aren't just traits, they are physical manifestations of time passing.
That's a profound way to look at it.
They are evidence of 6 years of growth, trial and error, and change. But the author's worn-out clothes, those are a physical manifestation of time standing completely still. The clothes are literally an anchor tying them to 8 years ago.
Framing the clothes as temporal markers is a brilliant way to understand the psychological shock the author is experiencing.
Because they've been stuck.
Exactly. When you live in deep isolation, time loses its texture. Episodic memory requires novel experiences, new places, new people, new challenges to lay down chronological markers.
Like milestones in your mind.
Right. If every day is spent in the same room doing the same routine, the brain stops recording time accurately. 8 years can feel like one long, blurry afternoon.
There are no milestones to measure against.
Exactly. But the moment the author stands next to this friend, time is no longer abstract. It becomes brutally, terrifyingly concrete.
The blur comes into focus.
Yes, the author is suddenly staring at a biological and social clock, seeing a physical representation of exactly how many ticks they've missed. The illusion of suspended time is shattered.
And as intense as this visual and sensory realization is on the train platform, it's really only the prologue.
Just the beginning.
Because eventually, they have to leave the station and go to a bar. They have to sit down across a table. And that's where the visual contrast morphs into an even more devastating realization. The conversations, you have to open their mouths and speak to each other.
The visual discrepancy was painful, but the conversational discrepancy is where the true psychological agony sets in.
So they are at the bar. The friend, naturally, is effortlessly charming. He's a host. Carrying a conversation is literally his area of professional expertise.
He does this for a living.
Right. He starts sharing stories. He talks about traveling overseas. He talks about making the bold move to the big city, living independently, navigating the challenges of adulthood.
Living a full life.
He casually mentions striking up conversations with complete strangers. And as the friend is laying out this rich, vibrant tapestry of life experiences, the author is sitting there, listening, and realizing with absolute horror that they have literally nothing to offer in return.
Nothing at all.
8 entire years have evaporated, and there's no narrative to show for it. So the author just falls completely, utterly silent. They devolve into a passive sounding board for the friend's life.
It's the realization of a profound internal emptiness.
I think anyone listening can tap into a smaller version of this. It's the high school reunion effect.
Oh, definitely.
It's that feeling when you log onto LinkedIn and see everyone you went to college with getting promotions and starting companies while you feel stuck in a rut.
Social media is notorious for that.
But here, the breaking point, the moment in the essay that is genuinely heartbreaking, is when the friend finally notices the depth of this silence. The friend pauses, leans in, and with genuine, sincere concern asks, "Are you okay?"
Ouch.
And the author notes that this single, simple question completely crushes whatever defenses they had left.
It really highlights a tragic irony about human interaction.
The friend's kindness is the most devastating weapon on the table.
Because you can't fight it.
Exactly. If the friend had been arrogant or condescending or a jerk about his success, the author could have just gotten angry. Anger is a fantastic defense mechanism. It shields the ego.
You can just villainize them.
Right, you can say, well, he's successful, but he's a terrible person, so I'm better than him. But sincere pity, sincere empathetic concern,
It pierces right through.
it bypasses all ego defenses and strikes directly at the core of the inferiority. I kept visualizing it like showing up to an intense book club where everyone is passionately debating a massive, complex novel.
Okay, I like this analogy.
And you sit down and you just brought a blank piece of paper. And when someone kindly, gently asks, Oh, did you forget your book? The silence in the room isn't just quiet. It is deafening.
That analogy perfectly captures the dynamic because what we are fundamentally talking about here is the currency of experience.
Currency of experience.
Yes, if we look at the sociology of friendship, especially the dynamic of catching up with someone after a long absence, conversations are essentially transactional. We trade narrative currency.
Like trading playing cards.
Basically, I give you an anecdote about a struggle in my life. You give me a story about a triumph in yours. We exchange these narratives to build empathy, to demonstrate personal growth, and to recalibrate our bond.
But the author is completely bankrupt. They have zero currency in their account.
Exactly. The friend is incredibly wealthy in this narrative. Currency travel, career progression, social ease. The author has nothing to trade.
Not a single coin.
But we also have to look beyond just the lack of stories and examine the physical toll this conversation is taking. We need to talk about cognitive load.
Cognitive load, you mean the actual processing power the brain is using in that moment.
Yes. To an outside observer, or even to the friend sitting across the table, the author just looks quiet, maybe a bit socially awkward or shy.
Just a quiet guy having a beer.
Right. But internally, the author's brain is redlining. Working memory, the part of the brain that holds and processes information in real time, has a very limited capacity.
You can only do so much at once.
And the author isn't just trying to think of a polite response. They are actively processing an immense amount of psychological trauma in real time.
Oh, wow.
They are fighting the visceral panic of being in a loud, unpredictable public space. They are managing the auditory and visual overload of the bar environment. They are desperately trying to monitor their own body language so they don't look crazy.
Trying to act normal.
And on top of all that, they're attempting to suppress a rising tide of self-loathing.
Every single one of those tasks is eating up a percentage of their working memory.
Until the system simply crashes.
Yeah.
All of that internal regulation takes a massive, measurable amount of metabolic energy. This perfectly explains why the essay mentions that after just 3 beers, the author is utterly physically depleted.
Right. Drinking 3 beers with an old buddy should be a relaxing way to spend a Friday night. But for the author, it was the neurological equivalent of running a marathon while solving complex calculus problems in their head.
Exactly.
The cognitive load was completely unsustainable. They hit a wall.
And beyond the cognitive load, there's a deeply emotional layer to this conversation at the bar that the source material touches on, which is really vital to understand.
Okay, what is it?
It's this concept of confronting idealized futures.
Oh, this part was heavy.
The author mentions this visceral, painful realization that the friend wasn't just living a good life. The friend was literally embodying the exact life that the author had once dreamed of for themselves.
That has to be one of the most uniquely painful experiences a human being can go through. Seeing your own unfulfilled potential, your own abandoned ambitions, walking around in someone else's body.
It's a mirror you don't want to look into.
It's one thing to feel like a failure in a vacuum. It's another level of torture to sit across from someone who took the exact path you wanted to take, faced the same forks in the road, and succeeded brilliantly while you gave up.
When we form our identities, particularly in our late teens and 20s, we construct these idealized future selves in our minds.
We map it all out.
We build narratives. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to move to the big city. I'm going to become confident and charismatic.
Yeah.
When an individual slips into severe isolation, they don't necessarily lose those desires.
The desires are still there.
The desires remain. What they lose is the belief that they possess the capability to achieve them. The dreams become ghost ships.
So sitting across from the friend is like looking at the ghost ship, but is fully operational.
Yes. Seeing the friend live out those exact developmental benchmarks forces the author to confront the death of their own idealized future. It is no longer a theoretical loss. It's tangible.
It's sitting right across the table.
What the author is experiencing at that table isn't just awkwardness or jealousy. It is a profound form of mourning. They are mourning the phantom self, the person they could have been if they hadn't lost those 8 years.
And so, completely exhausted, with their cognitive load maxed out and emotionally battered by this intense comparison, the author finally throws in the towel.
They've had enough.
They make a polite excuse, the friend is understanding, and the author escapes the bar and heads back home. But reading the progression of the essay, you realize the physical escape is just an illusion.
It really is.
Surviving the bar was just the opening skirmish. The real battle, the absolute darkest part of this entire ordeal, is just beginning in the silence of their own bedroom.
Because the distraction of the external environment is gone, the noise of the bar, the need to maintain a facial expression, the sensory input, it all vanishes. There is absolutely nothing left to buffer the internal monologue.
The author gets back to their room, lies down in bed, and the emotional dam completely shatters. They are consumed by a wave of severe, overwhelming self-loathing.
It all floods in.
The abstract number they've been living with 8 years suddenly gains this crushing three-dimensional weight. They literally cannot sleep. They just lie there in the dark, tormented by this crystal-clear vision of their friend casually picking up the exact pieces of the future that the author had dropped.
It is the ultimate psychological reckoning.
That sounds terrifying.
The adrenaline of the initial execution has completely worn off. The overwhelming cognitive load of the social interaction has dissipated. And all that remains in the quiet of the room is the raw, unfiltered data of the comparison.
So how do we make sense of this midnight tsunami of regret? I kept trying to visualize what this actually feels like, and the closest analogy I could come up with is waking up from a coma.
A coma, okay.
Imagine you go to sleep, and you wake up, and suddenly everyone you know has aged a decade. Your friends have gotten married, they've built careers, they've traveled the world, they've experienced heartbreak and triumph, and you are exactly the same.
You're frozen in time.
Your internal map of the world is a decade out of date. The world moved forward, and the gravity of that lost time, the sheer volume of the void, hits you all at once in the dark.
Your coma analogy is incredibly accurate from a clinical psychological standpoint.
Oh.
What the author is enduring in that bed is a sudden, violently compressed period of grief.
Compressed grief.
Yes. Specifically, they are grieving their own lost time and their lost potential.
Compressed grief, meaning they are experiencing years of mourning all at once because they haven't been grieving it gradually over the 8 years.
Precisely. We talked earlier about how isolation suspends time and removes temporal markers. When you are isolated, you aren't creating new episodic memories, so the passage of time doesn't feel real.
It's just a blur.
You are in a state of stasis. Meeting the friend violently ruptured that stasis. It shattered the protective illusion that time had stopped. By sitting across from a living, breathing timeline of the last 6 years, the author was forced to process 8 years of chronological, real-world time in a single 4-hour window.
Processing 8 years of existential regret in a few hours.
It's massive.
No wonder the brain wouldn't let them sleep. The psychological hardware just cannot handle that kind of massive emotional download. It's like trying to run a massive software update on a 1990s computer.
It results in an emotional system failure. The regret isn't just a fleeting feeling of, I wish I had done things differently. It's an overwhelming wave of contradictory data that destroys the safety of the isolation they've painstakingly built.
The walls came tumbling down.
The brain is frantically trying to reconcile the static internal reality of the bedroom with the dynamic, terrifying external reality they just witnessed.
But this is where the essay, in our deep dive, takes a crucial transformative pivot. Just as this self-hatred threatens to swallow the author completely whole in that dark room, when the despair is at its absolute peak, there is a shift.
A very important one.
A vital shift in perspective occurs. And it's the singular realization that ultimately saves the entire experience from just being a tragic, depressing story of regret.
It's the epiphany that forms the entire philosophical thesis of the author's reflection.
Right. In the absolute depths of this sleepless night, when the self-loathing is deafening, a single phrase bubbles up in the author's mind. The phrase is, have I moved forward even a little compared to my past self?
Compared to my past self. That is the pivotal axis.
The author realizes, lying there staring at the ceiling, that comparing themselves to this polished, successful, charismatic friend is a rigged game. It's an unwinnable, masochistic trap.
A trap they set for themselves.
The true metric of success for that night wasn't who has the better life. It wasn't who had better stories to tell at the bar or who wore the better clothes. The true metric of success was the undeniable, physical fact that the author, who had been paralyzed and hidden away from the world for 8 years, actually stepped outside their front door today.
It represents a radical, necessary realignment of their entire value system.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, and I want to push back hard on this.
All right, let's hear it.
Because I think a lot of people listening might have the exact same cynical reaction I did initially. Only compare yourself to yourself. Honestly, that sounds like a cheesy motivational quote you see printed on a $5 mug at an airport gift shop.
Or a poster in a guidance counselor's office.
Right, or toxic positivity on Instagram. Does that concept actually hold any real psychological weight? When you are in the grips of severe depression, when you feel incredibly low and worthless, does telling yourself, at least I'm better than yesterday, actually work? It feels almost offensively simple to be effective.
I completely understand and validate that skepticism. When you hear a phrase like, compare yourself to yourself out of context, it absolutely sounds like a shallow platitude.
It really
It
does.
sounds like self-help fluff.
Uh,
But I want to provide a deep evolutionary and psychological defense of this concept because in practice, it is not just a platitude. It is a vital, scientifically backed psychological survival mechanism.
okay, and listening.
What the author is discovering intuitively in that dark room is the fundamental difference between horizontal comparison and vertical comparison.
Okay, horizontal versus vertical comparison. Let's break those down. What is the difference in how the brain processes them?
Horizontal comparison is our default setting. It's what we do instinctively. We look horizontally across the landscape at our peers.
We look side to side.
Exactly. We look at our friends, our siblings, our coworkers, or the curated lives of people on social media. We compare our current state to their current state. They have a better job, they are more attractive, they own a house, they are happier.
We all do it.
Now, evolutionary speaking, horizontal comparison had a purpose. In a small tribe of 50 people, you needed to know where you ranked to ensure you got a share of the resources. It drove healthy competition and group cohesion.
So if I see my neighbor humping better than me, I am motivated to improve my spear throwing.
Exactly. In a healthy state of mind and in a limited social pool, horizontal comparison can be motivating. But in a modern, globalized society, and especially for someone like the author,
It's toxic.
for the author and for anyone in the state of severe depression, anxiety, or who is in the early, fragile stages of rebuilding their life, horizontal comparison is an absolute psychological glitch.
It doesn't work.
It is a destructive metric because it completely ignores the differing starting lines and the hidden variables. It's comparing someone who just took a heavy cast off an atrophied leg to an Olympic athlete who has been training for a sprint.
The gap is just too wide.
The gap between the two is so impossibly wide that the brain doesn't feel motivated. It only registers despair and hopelessness.
Right. It just reinforces the negative bias. It proves the inferiority you already feel. He's amazing, I'm garbage, therefore I should just stay in my room forever.
Which brings us to the alternative, the life raft vertical comparison. Instead of looking horizontally across at others, you change the axis.
You look up and down.
You look vertically, up and down your own personal timeline. You compare your current self exclusively to your past self. Where was I yesterday? Where was I a month ago? What were my capabilities a year ago?
And when you change the axis, the entire metric of success transforms.
Entirely. When the author shifts from horizontal to vertical comparison, the narrative of the entire night flips on its head. Horizontally, the night was a catastrophic failure. The friend won the comparison in every conceivable societal metric.
Hands down.
But vertically, the night was a monumental, historic victory. Yesterday, the author couldn't even fathom leaving the house. Today, they successfully navigated a train station and sat in a bar for 2 hours.
I really want to dwell on the contrast of these two specific victories for a second, because the juxtaposition is so powerful.
It really is.
You have the friend's victory, which is a loud, visible, societal success. He's a host, he travels, he possesses massive social currency. That's the kind of victory that society claps for, the kind that gets likes on social media.
With external validation.
But then you have the author's victory, which is an entirely internal, silent, invisible shift. Leaving the house, facing the sheer, unadulterated terror of the outside world, engaging with the fear instead of hiding from it.
And it's crucial to recognize that both of those victories are valid, but they exist on completely different operational scales.
The author's realization is that they don't need to compete on the friend scale. The internal victory is massive enough to validate the effort. Which brings us to the morning after. The sun finally comes up, the grueling sleepless night ends, and the author reaches the profound conclusion that really serves as the ultimate takeaway of this entire ordeal.
The realization about the permanent nature of action itself.
Yes, the author realizes that the extreme awkwardness they felt at the bar, the crushing silence, the intense feelings of being pathetic and inadequate, all of those things, while incredibly painful, are just feelings.
And feelings change.
And feelings, no matter how intense or suffocating they are in the moment, are fundamentally fleeting. The embarrassment will eventually fade, the cortisol will leave the bloodstream, but that the action of going out, the literal physical execution of the New Year's resolution, that is an undeniable, unerasable fact in the physical universe.
It creates a behavioral fact.
A behavioral fact. I love that term. By prioritizing action over overthinking, the author has created a permanent physical stepping stone. They prove to themselves that they are capable of breaking the curse of comparison, if only for a few hours. It's evidence. The feeling of inferiority will undoubtedly come back, but the historical fact that they did the thing can never be retroactively taken away.
What's truly fascinating here is how this concept of undeniable facts functions neurologically to build resilience. When overthinkers, and this applies to you, the listener, in your daily life just as much as it applies to the author, when we start spiraling into anxiety, imposter syndrome, or self-doubt, our brain is essentially generating fiction.
Making up stories.
It's writing highly compelling stories about how terrible we are, how much we're going to fail, how everyone secretly hates us.
It's fiction, but it's very convincing fiction, because our brain is the author.
And the fundamental rule of cognitive behavioral therapy is that you cannot fight fiction with more fiction. You can't just stand in front of a mirror and tell yourself, no, I'm great, everyone loves me, I'm super confident.
The brain calls your bluff.
The anxious brain won't believe it. It will reject the positive affirmation as a lie. You have to fight the brain's fiction with hard, objective, historical evidence. You need an anchor.
And the physical action serves as that anchor.
Exactly. The physical action provides hard data of your capability. Through neuroplasticity, you are literally wiring a new pathway. When the author's brain tries to tell them tomorrow, you are a complete failure, you can't do anything, don't even try, the author now has an anchor to throw down.
I did it yesterday.
They can say, that feeling might seem true right now, but the objective data is that I left the house yesterday, I navigated a public space, and I survived. The anxious brain cannot argue with a behavioral fact.
Action is the ultimate antidote to the paralysis of perfectionism. It forces the brain to acknowledge reality.
It slowly, steadily builds genuine confidence. Confidence isn't some magical state of knowing you will succeed. True confidence is simply having a historical record of surviving the attempt.
So how do we apply this? Because I want to make sure the listener can take this incredibly intense, extreme story and use the mechanics of it in their own life today.
That's the key.
Not everyone listening is a Hikikomori, obviously.
Yeah.
But absolutely everyone faces a version of this paralysis, this fear of comparison.
The practical application for the listener lies in strictly separating the outcome from the execution.
Okay, let's explore that. Give me a real-world scenario.
Let's say you are terrified of public speaking, but you have been tasked with giving a major presentation at work. If you operate like most people, your overthinking brain will focus entirely on the outcome. What if my voice shakes? What if I forget my notes and look stupid? What if my boss judges me?
The spiral starts again.
If you define success by achieving a perfect, flawless outcome, you will be paralyzed by fear.
Because you literally cannot control the outcome. You can't control what your boss thinks.
Right. But you have 100% control over the execution. You can redefine the metric of success. Success is no longer giving a perfect speech. Success is simply the physical act of standing up and delivering the presentation.
Just doing it.
Even if your voice trembles the entire time, even if you lose your place, even if it feels incredibly awkward and you blush, those are just feelings about the outcome. The undeniable behavioral fact is that you did it. You executed.
Or think about creative projects. Starting a new hobby, like painting or writing, and being terrible at it initially, or having a difficult overdue conversation with a partner.
Classic examples.
We avoid these things because we are afraid of the awkwardness, the friction, the inevitable comparison to people who are already experts. But if we shift the axis, if we utilize vertical comparison, we realize that doing it badly, doing it awkwardly, is infinitely better than not doing it at all.
The attempt is the win.
The behavioral fact of "I tried" becomes the solid anchor for the next attempt.
It's about radically accepting that the emotional fallout, the midnight regrets, the embarrassment, the physical exhaustion might just be a mandatory part of the process. You don't take action to avoid those negative feelings.
You take action despite them.
You take action despite them, armed with the knowledge that the physical action will long outlive the temporary emotion.
You take action knowing the action outlives the emotion. That is such a powerful, paradigm-shifting perspective.
Yeah.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today, from the deepest depths of isolation to the mechanics of building confidence. Let's just take a breath and summarize the incredible journey we've been on with this deep dive.
It really is a remarkable progression of the human mind under pressure.
We started with the paralyzing ping of a 6-year-old text message, and we unpacked the very real neurological reality of social atrophy. We saw how the author bypassed their amygdala's overthinking loop through the sheer speed of execution.
The biological hack.
We navigated the brutal visual and sensory shock of the train station reunion, diving into evolutionary biology to understand the spotlight effect and the heavy physical weight of temporal markers. We sat through the deafening agony of the empty narrative at the bar, exploring how relationships rely on the currency of experience.
And we broke down the cognitive load that causes a brain to crash under the weight of idealized futures.
And we didn't look away from the dark aftermath. We analyzed the concept of compressed grief, the psychological system failure of 8 lost years, hitting all at once in the middle of the night.
But most importantly, we witnessed the triumphant, saving shift in perspective.
We learned why horizontal comparison destroys us when we are vulnerable, and why vertical comparison, measuring our current selves strictly against who we were yesterday, is a vital, scientifically sound tool for survival. And finally, we uncover the concrete power of execution.
The undeniable facts.
The profound realization that our feelings of inadequacy and embarrassment will eventually fade. But the undeniable behavioral facts we create through action are permanent. They are the anchors that slowly, steadily pull us forward into a new reality.
It's a testament to the neuroplasticity and resilience of the human mind, proving that even after years of dormancy, the pathways can be rebuilt.
It truly is. Now, as we wrap up, we always like to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to carry with you into your day. We spent a lot of time analyzing the author's specific text message, but I want to turn the focus directly onto you.
Because every single person listening has their own version of that scenario.
Exactly. So here's the final thought, the question I want you to seriously mull over today. We all have an unread message in our lives. I don't necessarily mean a literal text sitting on your phone, although it might be.
And it could take many forms.
It could be a difficult conversation you're avoiding with a family member. It could be a creative project, a business idea, or an application you're putting off because you're terrified it won't be perfect. It could be an apology you owe someone, but your ego won't let you send.
We all have one.
Whatever it is, you are avoiding it because you are afraid of the awkwardness, the friction, or the inevitable comparison to others. But based on the psychological architecture we mapped out today, if taking physical action is the only thing that leaves a permanent positive mark on your timeline, what is the one unread message you need to reply to today without overthinking?
What specific action can you execute right now using your motor cortex before your prefrontal cortex has the chance to generate 100 reasons why you shouldn't?
Because remember, the inner workings of the human mind might be murky. The diagnostic landscape of our anxiety might be incredibly complex, but the cure, the execution, the physical act of simply turning the doorknob and stepping through, that is entirely, completely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining us on this intense, deeply rewarding deep dive. We will catch you in the next one.